Berserk and the Band of the Hawk. This is something that I literally knew nothing about until very recently, but it turns out that this is a well-known anime story that has seen various versions like the comic book where it originated, 2 anime series and a video game adaptation, which is the product I am going to be reviewing today. An anime hack and slash is something that I hadn't done before in this channel, and to be honest, this is not the type of game that I grew up playing or the type of game that I mostly play nowadays. But after having played and enjoyed games like Dark Souls and Resident Evil so much in the last 2 years, both of which were produced in Japan, it was only a matter of time for me to try something like this eventually. In any case, it is good to try new things. It keeps your mind and your channel fresh. So let's do this. Let us start this review of Berserk and the Band of the Hawk. The combat in this game follows a structure laid by the Dynasty Warrior games. Now, I haven't played any of these games, so my references won't come from any of them. I bought this game more for the story than the gameplay because, to be honest, I have never been a huge fan of hack and slash games. The only hack and slash game that I have played and enjoyed are the Prince of Persia games, and those were at the same time the reason why I stopped playing them in the first place. We could also consider the Hellblade Duology and Rise Son of Rome as other games in the genre that I like, both of which, however, I play mainly for the story than the gameplay. It's not that I have anything against the genre, it's simply that I like other types of game more, and I don't have all the time in the world to play every genre consistently. However, I saw this game on Steam during a Koei Tecmo sale, and it stood out from the rest. And when something stands out, I usually indulge the feeling because that's how I got into games like Hellblade, and Hellblade was the original reason why I started doing YouTube. So I bought the game and gave it a try, and man, I'm so glad I did. The combat in this game is extremely fun. It's one of those systems that feel intuitive and more satisfying the more you play. Combos are simple enough to pull off and not requiring of lightning fast precision, which is my main problem with other fighting games. Unlike other games in which unlocking more moves can feel like a difficult increase more than a power increase, in Berserk I actually felt stronger the more levels I raised and the more combos I unlocked. The character roster also felt noticeably different. God's raw power, Casca's lethal dexterity and Griffith's lightning speed, among other characters, all felt fun and satisfying to use. Although there are a few missions during story mode that you can choose what character you want to play as, most of the time you play as Guts. Now, during free mode and Endless Eclipse, you get to choose whatever character you want and can have at it with the Endless Slaughter. One of the things that impressed me the most about this game is how many enemies it could process at the same time. This game came out in 2017. I don't know how many enemies older Dynasty Warriors could process, but nevertheless, thousands of soldiers at the same time in the same map is pretty impressive. Other games from great studios struggle to process 3 enemies at the same time, and this game renders thousands all at once. No other game that I have played creates the feeling of slashing your way through an army as well as this game does, which makes sense considering that you're fighting armies most of the time in the story, and the main character Guts, the Slayer of Thousands, is extremely overpowered. Talking about that, the game can feel a little easy at times. When I started playing the game, I was just slicing my way through armies without even understanding what I was doing. I knew that if slashing my way without any more thought would be the only solution to victory, I would grow bored out of this game very quickly. So I cranked the difficulty to the tops, and this happened. Obviously, swallowing your health bar to increase challenge is ridiculous and not the ideal way to approach the game during a first playthrough. Berserk mode is better for high-level characters, so I lowered it to hard, and that's where I've stayed through the entire game. The game is still relatively easy, but now I have to manage my health and healing items more often, so that gives me something to think about while mashing the X button on my controller. This system is all about distribution of power, striking at opponents and keeping your flow without giving them time to counterattack. Even when riding a horse, you're still powerful. In most games, horses are more a detriment than an aid during combat, and even if this game is not exactly the exception, horses are still very powerful and useful in wrecking your way through enemy ranks. Now, not all enemies are cannon fodder in this game. Frequently, during massive battles, you will encounter elite enemies, captains or generals that will be able to stagger you and break your combo. These serve as mini-bosses within large-scale battles. There are also full-blown boss fights in this game as well, some of which are actually challenging. These enemies are obviously tougher than your average soldier, forcing you to adapt during the fight instead of relying on sheer brutality only. It is mostly during these sequences that you will rely more on your block and parry button. Obviously, the parry in this game is nowhere near as necessary and satisfying as landing a parry in a game like Sekiro, but it is still useful and satisfying. Parrying an attack will temporarily stagger an enemy, opening them for a few easy hits. Some boss fights become easier if you land those parries, while other boss fights require you to simply move out of the way because the beast is way stronger than even Guts. The battle with the Nosferatu sword has been the toughest part of the game so far, and the whole atmosphere of that sequence both in story and gameplay was one of the main reasons why I chose to cover this game during the month of October. The opening sequence, albeit easier, is also a full horror sequence, and other parts in the game, with the Death Knights and the organ music, also feel the creepy vibes as well. This game becomes full horror when you reach the Age of Darkness arc in the story mode, and this shift in narrative not just changes the way the world looks, but also changes how the character of Guts fights. I like that, because the game reflects the character's evolution as a warrior and his descent into darkness not just through the narrative, but through gameplay as well. At the beginning, Guts relies only on his sword. When he joins the Band of the Hawk, he learns to wield knives from Juro, who is a knife expert, and later in the game, as he grows older and more physically maimed, he accepts the aid of more ranged weapons like crossbows and cannon guns. His moveset also changes. At the beginning, Guts' attacks are rough, full of brute force and perhaps a bit of cockiness. Later, his attacks become sharper, faster, more to the point, and less dependent on strength due to his physical disabilities, letting his rage and instinct carry him more than eyesight or brute strength. That way, combos become faster and deadlier, and compromise your character way less than at first. The overall gameplay of Berserk is pretty simple. You start in a lobby screen that changes as the story moves on, and you can either interact with your fellow mercenaries in some optional dialogues and events, or you can go straight to your next battle in the scenario list, which gives you a description, some optional objectives, allows you to choose your difficulty, the works. Once inside the mission, the game will present you with a cutscene or some dialogue events, and then move you to the battle preparation sequence where you can buy equipment or upgrade the one you have. An interesting element in this game is that you can amalgamate items to make stronger items. For example, if you have a Ring of Strength, which increases your attack power, you can amalgamate this one with another Ring of Strength to make an even stronger Ring of Strength. You can also combine the item with, say, a Necklace of Defense to add defense boosts to the Ring of Strength and other stuff like that. This is a really cool way of giving value to all the loot that you find during missions, aside of just selling it like you would do in most other games. You can also invest money earned by winning battles to train your characters and increase their stats faster in case you are finding the battles too hard for your current level. One thing that I like from this game is that it uses menu systems without shame. Most modern systems run from HUDs and menus because they, quote-unquote, break immersion, preferring to present their systems within the game world with minimalistic HUDs instead. Some games do this right and in interesting ways, but unfortunately, that's not the case always, and therefore, most games suffer for it. Most games will have you running around the camp interacting with stiff characters for some minimal dialogue, riding to the nearest town to sell your stuff, and then running or sailing 100 miles of repetitive activities only to finally start your mission an hour later. Berserk is a much-focused game. The menus allow you to quickly access the good stuff without having to traverse miles of boring emptiness. It allows itself to focus on its strengths, which are the story and the combat. There is no padding in between. That way, each time you load the game, your brain is always engaged and never disconnecting from the present experience. Now, despite the horror references that I've said already, Berserk and the Band of the Hawk is not a horror game, but a dark fantasy story. There will be plenty of heroic, even rousing moments, but there are also some very dark things happening here. The fact that this story was originally told through manga and anime allowed the writers to explore themes and angles with the characters that you wouldn't even see in HBO or any other source that uses live actors. The characters in this game are so multi-layered, but unlike some other stories in recent memory that overdo it to the point of ridiculousness, they never feel forced or out of place or inconsistent. A character like Griffith, who is one of the most morally grey characters in the entire story, feel believable and mostly likable, regardless of the fact that he will do some very heroic stuff in one sequence and bring the best out of his band, and then, in another sequence, he will do the most treacherous and inhumane thing and bring the absolute worst out of his comrades. The ambiguity and duality of these characters feel closer to real life than other stories, which pretend to play around with those ideas, but instead they feel contrived and cheap. In Berserk, the characters do right and wrong. They help, they lie, they protect and support one another, they manipulate and outright abuse one another, they laugh, they cry, they break up, they forgive, they quarrel, they fall in love, and all of it always feels as part of the characters and their constant growth, instead of the split personality issues that can happen in so many other stories. I won't get into too much details here because I haven't finished the game yet, I don't want to spoil much here, and I might delve into the narrative more in a future video. But from what I've gathered so far, the story of Berserk and the Band of the Hawk is a very interesting one, and I simply can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Seriously, if you like action games with easy to learn yet fun combat, light RPG mechanics without fluff, a linear, interesting story with great soundtrack, then play this game. The horror vibes also make it a good choice for the Halloween season, but in any case the game would fit well at any other time of the year. And that's all I've got for today. I'm going to play another episode of Berserk before going to sleep and probably have nightmares with it. Stay safe, love you all, and I'll see you in the next one.